My former boss, former Mayor Rob Poythress of the good city of Madera, Valley Central. You know, when you're looking for a place to want to live, think Madera,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So,
The heart of the valley, the heart of the state. Yeah,
and that's only just the teeny tip of the iceberg in all the added value that being a resident of Madera brings. Now, Rob is the supervisor, a supervisor representing the city as part of county governance. But throughout my knowing Rob, he's been what's your role with Central Business Bank?
I'm actually the manager of
Citizens Business
Citizen,
Bank?
yeah, I'm the manager. This is my 13th
So,
year.
the manager of Citizens Business Bank, and if there's anyone who might be able to help you really develop a sense of command moving forward with preparing a business plan, it'd be Rob. So without further ado.
Very good. My most important title, and it's, you know, I am Mayor Emeritus. That sounds better next mayor, right? But actually, it's the former chair of the Madera Economic Development Commission, and I'm still on the board. So Bobby's in. Exactly. And by the way, has everybody met Bobby and kind of knows what the EDC does and so forth? Anyway, promoting economic development, and it's all about business here in Madera County. Not only does the EDC attract business, but also helps grow existing business. Over the last 5 to 6 years, you know, we've had a really good economic increase as far as activity, and primarily due, well, you know, we were recovering from a recession, but also because of our ag economy. You know, we've got a lot of almonds, pistachios, and things of that sort, and there's a lot of ancillary industries that support ag, and that's been expanding so well that, you know, even though we weren't getting a lot of new business in, the existing business was expanding, and the EDC also helps businesses grow, find other land, and things of that sort. There's a ton of stuff the EDC does, and proud to be part of that organization. And so Bobby's a great guy to meet, and he can, in fact, let's organize a seminar, an EDC seminar. How's that? That works well. But thank you so much for the introduction, and just a little more background. I've been in the banking industry. This is my 37th year. I know it's hard to believe. I must have started when I was 10, right? But you know, but I'm originally from Madera, and my family has been involved in farming, and so we still are. My brother, I'm partners with him, but he's the day-to-day farmer. So I use the word farmer a little bit loosely. You know, it's kind of like, hey, Roger, how's everything going? Okay, cool. You know, so I'm in 72 degrees all the time, and he's in 32 and 106. So, but and then also we're involved. We're partners in Tico Hardware. And that's a ag hardware store that's been around since the 30s, Thompson and Gill family, and we purchased it about 12 years ago. And I'm going to probably be using that a lot as an example in terms of small business involvement. But I love small business. I love business. I think, you know, capitalism is what made this country great. Small business is the backbone of our nation. And you know, every big business that's out there started off as a small business. You know, you think of Hewlett Packard and Jobs and Wozniak and all these guys, you know, they started out of their garages and ideas and you know, it wasn't like, you know, they turned 18 and they had, you know, $100 million and said, okay, let's even make Microsoft greater. You know, they all started off as small business people. So that's what's such a great thing. What I like to do is to give an example about why a business plan and business planning is so important, because a business plan is something that is going to describe a journey that you're going to take over the next 5 to 10 to 15, 20, 25 years. You know, now it's not going to be exact because there's going to be a lot of changes, you know, and there's going to be changes in technology and marketplace and whatever, but at least it's a starting place to describe where you're going to go. And I'll give you an example. How many people have heard of the Pan American Highway? the Pan American Highway is a highway that goes from Alaska all the way to the tip of Argentina. It's about 11,000 miles long, and so it takes you, you know, as close as you can get to the North Pole to as close as you can get to the South Pole by car. So, you know, so what I'd like to do is talk about, you know, if you were to take that trip and start in Alaska and want to go all the way to the tip of Argentina, talk a little bit about what you would need for that particular trip. Okay, so let's just set it out. Let's say you've got, you know, you're traveling, your husband and or wife, or a good buddy, or you're in college. You know, it's, you know, a couple of guys or something having a great time. But so you've got let's say you start out, you've got your Toyota pickup, and you've got a couple of credit cards, and you've saved up some money to take this trip. So what are some things that you would need, that you think you would need to consider as you travel from Alaska all the way to the tip of Argentina as part of the planning process? Yes. The destination. Okay, so it's just not getting there. There's a lot of places that are in between. Okay, excellent. A map, exactly. Yeah, a lot of people, you know, these days, it's kind of like, oh, I don't need a map, I've got this, you know. But what if you're at a range? What if there isn't any GPS and you're sitting here going, you know, Siri, where are you? Where are you? You know, and so, yeah, a map. And so with that map, you're going to take a look at it and kind of map out your route, and you'll find those places that are in between that you talked about that may be other things you need to consider. What else do we need to consider for that trip? Yes?
Outfit changes because the climate's going to be different.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Because you think about it.
And maybe like main places where you're going to go shopping, like the outlets.
The outlets, yes. There's always, you know.
I hadn't thought of that, but yeah.
There's.
You want to make sure you're going to stop on all the right ones.
Thank you. There's always opportunities that you maybe that pop up you're not even aware of. So perfect. You know, you need to be aware of that. So yeah, outfit changes because, you know, you think about, let's say you start off in Alaska and it's the middle of summer and it's like, hey man, this is, you know, the days are long. Well, what is it like in down under? It's winter, right? Short days, snow, foul weather, high altitudes. You know, you may need chains and things of that sort. So you need to consider that. How about when you're driving through, say, especially Central America? What are some things you need to consider? Yes. Language. Language barriers. Yeah. Right. And insects. You know, we went to Panama a few years ago, and Vince Payne, some friends of ours have doing some great work in a village down there. And when you go to Panama, you have to you have to be aware of malaria and other types of diseases and so forth that insects and so forth can spread. So you have to get some shots, all right, and bring your passport, and you've got currency, yes. Snacks, yes, exactly, because you could be out in the middle of nowhere and hungry, and there's no water. You don't know about the water quality, so you have to, you know, take those supplies. Different hair supplies, thank you. I hate it when I don't have the right hair supplies. And so there are definitely some things to consider, yeah. And here's something else. The road doesn't connect all the way. There's a 65-mile stretch between Panama and Colombia known as the Darien Strait. And if you go through there, there's really not a road, and there's a bunch of bad guys in that area, a bunch of rebels and stuff like that. And so you usually take a ferry around there, this detour and so forth. And then if you're going to be driving through Brazil, you need a visa, okay, besides having a passport. So there's all these things to consider to have a successful trip from Alaska all the way to Argentina. And it's a destination, it's a trip, and it's things that, now, you could probably make it otherwise, but it's going to take twice as long. Yes?
What about the medical accommodations, if your insurance is comparable, or what if you do have something happen in
Right. A medical emergency, exactly. You need to think about your health. You need to think about, to make sure you have the right meds that you're bringing. And, the shots I talked about, absolutely. Because, if you've got somebody who maybe has experienced heart failure or COPD or some of the things like that, and they need medical attention. In fact, it happened to somebody visiting Vince down in Panama. They were experiencing some heart failure issues, and man, it was difficult getting them back to Panama City. So it's not for the faint-hearted. You need to think about those things. And altitude, if you're going over the Andes and all kinds of stuff. So to have a successful trip, these things need to be considered up front. And it's a destination, and it's very analogous to what Chris was talking about with business planning. You're taking you're going on a trip, you're going to a destination, whatever that might be. It might be whatever you decide that goal is, that you want to have. You're opening up a shop selling something and you want to expand to 10 or whatever that goal is. And to get there, you need to plan. There's an old adage, which I'm not sure if I really agree with it. They say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Well, it's true that things aren't going to go well for you if you fail to plan. But I don't necessarily think that you're going in intentionally planning to fail. You're not doing that. It's just a good idea. And you may not fail, but again, you might, because there's so many pitfalls to consider. So what I like to do is to share a little bit today with some of the things that I've observed in the banking industry. I do business lending, so I loan to farmers, I loan to small business people, I loan to manufacturers, professionals, things of that sort. And so I've seen those who have been really, really successful and those that haven't been so successful. And I'll use some of my own experiences because, we have been successful in some ways, and there's other things that I've done, investments and so forth, that have been disasters, So I'll share some of those things too, and fortunately, I've lived to tell about it. So one of the first things, in your handout, and we talk about, I think it's point number 2. In fact, point number 1 talks about an executive summary, but it says write this section last. So we'll follow the rules, and you can take a look at it. And feel free to not worry about, writing things in or anything like that. I mean, if you want to make a few notes, you can do that. But this is something for later on when you do write your business plan. But one of the first things it talks about, and it sounds very simple. I mean, it's kind of like elementary, of course. It says, what business will you be in and what will you do? But I think it's important to recognize that because, you think about, let's say you're opening up a restaurant and, I'm opening up a restaurant, I'm going to feed people. But opening up a restaurant is much more than that. It's about, okay, what type of food and what kind of experience do I want, my customers to have and so forth. So it's a lot more than just serving food. Goals, it's so important to have a goal in your business, because you say, hey, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get going. But in life, it's important to have a roadmap, and to have goals and to know where you're going and so forth. Because otherwise, after a while, you're just kind of sitting out there, just kind of going through the motions. And that's the worst thing somebody can do in life, is just to be complacent, and just, one of the worst things to hear is somebody who has a job and, they can retire at a certain age and they're counting down the days till that comes. And you're just sitting there going, I can't stand that, because it's like, okay, when you get there, let's say it's 5-10 years down the road, and they say, I can't wait to retire. Well, number one, you're not going to be any healthier. You're probably going to be less healthy. You wasted 5 years in doing what you want to do, and it's just a waste of time. And we're not here to, I think on this earth to waste our time. It's to be productive and to have those goals and to be able to look forward. So it's very, very important to have those goals, because, you may say, well, I want to be happy and I want to make some money and meet people and so forth. But, a lot of times people, as much as it is important to have a goal to get into business, you also should have an exit strategy, okay? Because, and it's almost like a good meeting. A good meeting has a beginning time, but also you should have an ending time. Otherwise, it can just kind of go on and on and on. So, so what that does is it forces good planning. So an exit strategy would be if you're a sole proprietor and your kids may not want to take over your business. In a lot of cases, they don't. So how are you going to, let's say you want to work till you're 65 and then you want to do something else after that. How are you going to get out of that business successfully? Do you just shut it down, or do you sell it to somebody, or do you get a partner in, or do you groom somebody to take over your business who wants the business? So those are things to think about early on. I know some folks here in Madera who it's a generational business and a couple of family members in it, and both of them are in their 60s, and there's nobody that wants to take it over, and there's a lot of issues, and they really don't have an exit strategy, at this point. So it's something that they need to think about. There's some businesses that like farming. In farming, you can kind of slow down and you can get a farm manager to take it on, and it's easier. But if you're a CPA, or again, have a small restaurant or something like that, you need to think about those things as far as grooming a successor. Your business philosophy, it's, what is that philosophy? Is it to make money? Is it to serve people? Is it to, what is that? I would say that a good philosophy is to serve others, because if you can serve others well, you're going to make money. There's a lot that goes into it, but if your whole goal is to just make money, I don't think you're going to do that well, because it's going to show to your clients and your customers that that's what you care about. So something to think about there. Talking about your industry, is it a growth industry? What changes do you foresee in this industry? I think back about Madera 50 years ago, and there's a few of us in this room that recall what Madera looked like. And, we think about the mail stop. Well, that was Hal's Market. It was a small grocery store. And there were no major markets in Madera at that time. There was Safeway down over here where the social services is. There were no chain restaurants, none. We had Reed and Bell, and we had Old Boy, and we had the Big Top drive-ins and things of that sort. McDonald's didn't exist here. There were no chain coffee shops. You had Furnessi's, you had the Fruit Basket, you had a few things like that. There were no chain drugstores at all. It was Callaway's and Madera Drug and Hunter's Drug and places like that. Everything was small business. And I have a feeling that nobody back in those days envisioned that there'd be no more small, or virtually no more small drugstores. They're sold out of major markets. Your mom and pop markets are pretty much gone. The Bridge store was around since the late 20s. They're shut down now. There's virtually no mom and pop super successful hamburger stands. They're all Jack in the Boxes, McDonald's, and all those places. So and there were coffee shops where you got your coffee. There was nothing like a Starbucks or something. So when you think about industries, nothing ever stays the same. Things are changing, new products, new technology, tastes. We think about downtown Madera, we had JCPenney's, and then they moved out next to Walmart, and now JCPenney's is struggling to even stay alive nationwide, and that's because of something called online shopping. It's something called Amazon. So, so that's hitting folks. So, when you think about, your industry, is it something that is stable? Is it something that is somewhat insulated from changes? Or is it something that in 10 years, it's not going to exist because of technology? And again, you have to think about these things. People, I know when Walmart came to Madera, people were saying, oh, Walmart came in and when they came in, this closed down and this closed down and this closed down. And I was thinking, well, you know what, this and this, they were doomed to close anyway. Number one, because they had really bad service, and it was the only reason people went there is because they didn't have a Walmart. Not that Walmart's the greatest thing in the world, but it was still, and it's just changes. And with Amazon and all these other places happening, I mean, you're starting to see the big box stores closing and shrinking and consolidating. Even Walmart is starting to close some stores. So things are changing so rapidly out there. You need to think about those things. Now, I'll talk a little bit about a success story here in Madera, a business that's been around for a while that was able to survive despite the influx of two giants that came to town. And I'm talking about a hardware store. Hardware store GBS, everybody lives here knows about it and shops there and loves it, and it's a great little store. They were able to survive Home Depot coming into town and Lowe's coming into town. Now, management, they definitely took some hits when those guys came to town. I mean, it was, they took probably a third of the business away immediately and so forth because, for whatever reason. I mean, let's face it, Lowe's and Home Depot, I mean, they sell lumber and they've got, they sell appliances and they've got all kinds of stuff that GBS doesn't offer. But after people kind of got, took a look at Home Depot and Lowe's, they were saying, there's certain things that GBS does a lot better than I'm experiencing here at Home Depot or Lowe's, and in terms of small hardware things or advice or things that they couldn't offer, and so today you can go into GBS and it's a quick in, quick out. You can ask one of the staff members and you can show them a part and you can say, okay, I've got, what is this? They can say, okay, we've got this over here. So they've been able to survive because of convenience and service and and location and things of that sort. So those are some things to think about. You can survive when giants come to town, but again, it's like, what do you have that they don't have? What can you capitalize on that they can't capitalize on? So any comments so far? Again, I want to make this interactive. I don't want to just blather on and so forth. I like to look at everybody's eyes and make sure they're not, falling back. So feel free to interject. And then again, when we went over some of those strengths and so forth. Now, here's something to think about, is your form of ownership, okay? I would venture to say that most people here going into business are going to start out as a sole proprietor, okay? You're going to go down and get your fictitious and get your business license, and on your tax return, it'll be a Schedule C. And, which is great. That's a wonderful thing to do. Yes, Bobby.
Make that's a little bit harder on the fictitious business.
Okay.
Just because you kind of abbreviated it, just want to make sure everybody understands
Yes.
the importance of that.
Right. Well, a fictitious filing is really, really important for your business. Number one, in my business, in the banking world, if I'm going to open up an account for you, and you've got a business, you have to have a fictitious filing. And so, for instance, let's say you've got a business name, Speed Sports, and Joe Smith is, I'm going to open up Speed Sports, and I'm a sole proprietor. So a fictitious filing would be, Joe C. Smith at 111 Main Street resides there, is opening up Speed Sports, and that's would be the fictitious name. It's a fictitious name because it's not a real person. Joe Smith is a real person, but Speed Shop is not a real person, so it's a fictitious. That's why it's called fictitious, but it needs to be filed. You go to the county clerk, fill out paperwork, and then, I'm not sure if they take it to the paper, or you take it to the.
paper.
You take it to the paper, okay, take it to the
25
paper.
there, 25 at the paper.
Gotcha. So then they print it, 3 or 4 times or whatever. Yeah. So that's what that is. But yeah, so it's really, really important that you have that. And then I think you have to refile every 5 years, I think it is. Something like, a lot of people forget about it, but that's what the rule is. Anything else on that? Okay, good. Okay, yes.
Okay, so, let's kind of go through the process of this. I created a business plan, I made sure everything looks good, now I'm ready to move on with my business plan.
Mm-hmm.
Then, and I make sure that zoning is good, everything is good, then I go and I get my business license,
Mm-hmm.
file for a fictitious, name. right?
Yes. Right, yeah. File
Insurance,
Yes, go ahead and do, yeah, exactly, do that. And then you can open up a business account with the bank. So, it's a requirement. So, let's look a little bit more, at this is a part, I think it's page 9, on the handout, but, looking at economics. And again, I'm gonna be probably covering some ground that Chris has already covered, and maybe I've already mentioned a few things, but, and this is what's so important, because, when you go through this business plan, and you really go through it and study it, and I know it's like a term paper or something, but it's so important because, you might go through your business plan and think, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna go down this road, because, this has been something I've wanted to do and whatever, but, I've looked at this and gosh, the trends don't look so hot, and what I've read about this and studying this and all that, so it may not be something you wanna do. Or you go through your business plan and you're gonna go, this is not the best thing, but if I tweak it a little bit and, I see a need over here, then that's where the value of a business plan comes in, because it can really help you target on what's going to make things happen for you. For instance, you look at facts about your industry, economics. Okay, so if I am, I'll use farming as an example. Okay, again, 50 years ago, this whole landscape looked different. You had some vineyards south of town, and then west of Madera was all cotton and hay and cattle and, all that stuff. There were no trees. I mean, I think you had a few families that had some orchards, but it was nothing, It was like, oh yeah, almonds. Yeah, I think they grow those up north or something. And pistachios. Wow, aren't those they have those in Iran, right? I mean, they weren't even thought of or heard of or thought about what people were gonna do. So, today, if a farmer said that they're gonna, I'm gonna grow 200 acres of cotton, I mean, somebody would look at them and just like, you're crazy, because all those cotton gins are gone and the price is in the tank and you can make so much more money in other things. So, when you think about your industry, you just can't go in and say, okay, I'm gonna start growing cotton, because you're gonna go broke. Okay, maybe something you really wanna do and something your family's done. Look at the size of your market when you go in. It's like, are you the only one doing it? And is there an opportunity for you? Or are there a lot of people doing it? I had a guy the other day at a ribbon cutting, restaurant owner, and he was asking me, hey, have you heard about any restaurants coming into town? And I said, well, no, not really. I haven't talked to my friend Dave Merchant lately, and so he hasn't mentioned anything. But anyway, no. But I said, no, I don't think there's anything, major that I know of right now, because he was worried. He didn't want any more restaurants in Madera, because, I'm not gonna say it's a cutthroat business or whatever, but there's a lot of competition. I mean, you've got all your inputs and price wars, and it's just gonna get harder and harder and harder. So he was like, and so, I know a lot of Maderans, want to see, some of the chains come into town, but those guys are some of the smartest people, because they know, they've done their research, they've done a business plan, and they have very successful and sophisticated software to help them figure out where they're gonna make money and where they're not gonna make money. And a lot of them know they're not gonna make money in Madera because of our economics, because of our demographics. Our average income per household, this might be old data, but I think it's around 38,000 per household. A place like Turlock is 52,000. So they know there's some kind of a break-even point with population and average income where they know they can go and make money. And, maybe that's 44, 45,000, I don't know, for like-size cities, but we're not there yet. So they know, and so going through this exercise, it'll help if you're gonna be able to make it. Again, current demand, I have a friend who a few years ago was considering opening up like a Sonoma-Williams store in Madera. And it was like, oh, okay, because I just knew that it's just like, oh my gosh, what a disaster that would be, because it's like, even in a place like Fresno where there's 520,000 people and you throw in the greater Clovis area, so you probably have 650, 700,000 people, there's one Sonoma-Williams that I know of. And so it draws from probably Madera also, so maybe it draws from 800,000 people. But they need that many people to stay in business because, it's got some higher end stuff. And I mean, you can get some stuff on, sale and maybe some good prices. But it was just, when I heard that, I was just like, ah. Well, fortunately, he decided not to go down that road. But again, know what your market is. It's whereas, you see other furniture stores here in town and goods, and you kind of see what, it kind of adjusts to the income levels, so, and again, you don't go into business to lose money, so you kind of have to make adjustments that way. Products, again, it's the product that your manufacturer is selling or service that you're providing, is it, what's the pricing? Are you pricing it correctly? At Tico Hardware, we're always looking at that. We're always having to consider, are we pricing it right? Because we have a niche market. I'll talk a little about niche markets, but our hardware store is primarily focused on ag and industrial. So we have nuts and bolts that are like industrial size and that are hard to find other places. So like somebody goes into GBS and Dennis doesn't sell them, he'll tell them to go to Tico. We have hydraulic hoses, we have steel chainsaws and things of that sort. So things that farmers need and farmers use. So, we're a little bit insulated from that market. Now, we do have some competition. There's, out by the airport several years ago, the people from Agriland opened up Madera farm farm supplies, and they kind of do more things in bulk. But so we get increases in our cost of goods sold, and so we have to make those adjustments all the time. And is this going to still be within market, or are these guys going to go other places? So that's something to consider in that regard. Well, the steel chainsaw line is considered one of the best chainsaws, advertisement, no. But but we can't control that pricing. It's like, our cost is this, and so, we have a certain markup and so forth. So that's something we can't control, but it's it's definitely consideration when you consider our other choices of chainsaws. Competition, again, we've hit on that a little bit. Yes,
Sorry to interrupt.
please, no.
Before he leaves the subject though, on the marketplace, he was talking about companies coming into Madera and how they know their market, especially obviously chains. But it's just interesting for me when I go to trade shows, which is frequently, and I know I was in a trade show last fall, I approached a food chain business, and so I was talking to him about one of the communities in Madera, and he said, well, let me just see, he just actually had a iPad, he punched in the name of that city, sophisticated it was. In less than 5 minutes, he had all that material over, and that's how much they do their homework on everything, and why, it's kind of frustrating for us, because we're so proud of Madera County, Chochoa, marketing, and we think that everybody should be here. And you go up there and they tell you within, 2 minutes, sorry, you don't even qualify. And so what Rob's saying is so correct, and that's why your business plan is so important, is whether or not, do you fit in that market, or is the market too small for you, or is the demographic wrong? So anyway, you just reminded
Thank
me
you.
of that point.
Absolutely, please, and thanks, for providing that, talking a little bit more about competition and going to restaurants, I think that's a great example, because, there's so many people who, and I don't know in this room, I only know, about, the mail stop and so forth. So as far as what everybody else is doing, I'm not picking on restaurants, I'm just using restaurants as an example. A lot of folks, okay, grandma had a restaurant and it was really cool, or I think our family is really skilled in this type of food, or whatever it is, and we can get into this one location, fairly inexpensively, and so we can do this and we can do this, and, we can make some money. But, there's a ton of competition for restaurants, and for, lunch crowds and dinner crowds and so forth. And they just come and go. It seems like, I'll be at one place and 6 months later I say, yeah, let's go ahead and try this, go there, and it's closed or whatever. So, because there's so much competition, there's in that particular area. Now, so and then there's other businesses where there isn't so much competition, so you don't have to worry about it so much. But in the banking industry, my other day job, I've got like 7 or 8 other banks here in Madera that anybody can go to at any time. So I have to be aware as what are they charging on checking accounts? What kind of fees do they charge on this? And what are they charging on their loans? And how much are they paying on interest, And so those are, definitely things to be aware of. And so when I'm out marketing, trying to get somebody to borrow money from me on a business loan, I know what that other bank is offering. So I can kind of go in with more confidence, knowing what the pricing structure is. So it's so important to know, and I know Chris hit on it, is to know what your competition is doing, how they're doing it, and what features. And listen, like I'll hear somebody say, well, XYZ Bank, Tom's been my account officer for the last 10, 15 years, and gosh, he's done a great job, and this and that, and okay, that's wonderful. So if I hear a year from now that Tom is retired, guess what I'm going to do? Hey, Joe, hey, how's it going there? Yeah, what's going on? And he said, yeah, Tom's retired, so, so that might be an opportunity for me. So always be, listening. Or, I like to compliment the competition. It's kind of a reverse psychology type of thing. If I were to go in and talk to somebody and they say, oh, I bank with Wells, and I go, oh, Wells, oh, man, those guys, they open up fake accounts and they do all this stuff, and they're crooked and all that sort of thing. And, well, you know what it makes my prospect? It makes my prospect sound stupid for banking with them. So why would I do that? So what I do is I go in and say, oh, yeah, Wells. Oh, yeah, well, who's your account officer? Oh, it's this guy. Oh, you've got a great banker. I mean, that is, congratulations. You've got a great guy taking care of you. And oftentimes, they'll do the opposite. They'll say, yeah, they're okay, but gosh, they charge me so much. They nickel and dime me. They do this, and I say, oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay, well, let's maybe see what I can do, for you. I can just do a free analysis, and we'll check it out, and we'll do an account analysis, and I'm finding I'm saving them $600-700 a month, and oh yeah, look, okay, cool, yeah. But but anyway, yeah, you never want to go in and, again, you make somebody sound like they're stupid for being there. Always compliment the competition because it's kind of that reverse psychology thing, gets people to kind of come back. But again, it's always that listening and hearing and watching and observing and what are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? For a restaurant owner, they may say, somebody may say, oh yeah, this place over here, I may have to go in there and I have to wait a half an hour to get my food and it's lunchtime and I don't have much time to eat it, and I'm checking my watch constantly, and so that might give you an idea. Okay, well, in my restaurant, that's something I need to do. I need to be able to get people in and out at lunchtime and so forth. So always be thinking about those things. I'll give you an example right now about a restaurant. There is the one that is across from GBS that now is on their third owner. Well, I think the third owner is going to make it happen, because it seemed like the first owner, I remember I would go in there and they would be closed at strange hours, times that they should be open, and then they say, oh, we ran out of that meat, or whatever. And then I didn't go back when they had the second owner, but this third owner, they catered the Kiwanis thing the other night, and they did a real nice job, so I'm probably going to end up going in there and eating and so forth. So that's, again, something to think about is you have one shot, maybe two, at making an impression, so some can be good and some can be not so good. I talked a little bit about niche businesses, the hardware store example, just we're not trying to compete with Lowe's, we're not trying to compete with GBS, we're not trying to compete with Home Depot. We're very focused on the ag industry. Now, talking about that and trends, something that it's been a very, very stable business because ag has been very, very stable. But guess what's coming up on the horizon? And I'm using this as an example to talk about industry things that are that could adversely affect our business. Something called SGMA, the State Groundwater Act. And what that has the potential of doing is cutting down the number of acres being farmed here in Madera County. And by cutting down the number of acres being farmed here, that means there's fewer people needing ag hardware, fewer things breaking down because there's fewer acres being farmed. They have fewer employees. And with fewer employees, guess what? That means fewer people going to your restaurants, fewer people going to this business, to that business, to the CPAs, to the insurance companies, and so forth. So that has the potential of affecting a lot here in every single business here in Madera. So that's, again, something to consider. That's why in a local economy it's important, it's a good thing to, as much as possible, to diversify it. So we're very heavily ag influenced here, and it'd be wonderful we had more opportunities to diversify our economy, and a lot of that, was way beyond a business plan. But again, something to keep in mind as far as, things that could be affecting our economy. Strategy, your business strategy, a lot of that has to do with marketing. How do you get the word out to your customers? Again, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was always about newspapers, and, you get it in the Tribune, you get it in the Bee, you put an advertisement in the Fresno Guide. Remember the Fresno Guide? And, I know, exactly, Lester Berger, no. But, but that was the thing. It was a newspaper, and then it was TV. It was like, P.J. Eads and Davey, you're not going to get 100 yards, and anyway, these crazy commercials. And then, this thing called the internet comes around, and it's like, oh, okay, and and then young people, they do something kind of strange. They stop reading newspapers. And they, it becomes something that older people read. And guess what? You start seeing circulation decreasing with newspapers. You see the Madera Tribune going from 6 days a week to 2 days a week, and now delivered through the mail. The Fresno Bee used to be a thick newspaper. Now it's like as big as the Tribune some mornings. So it kind of tells you, about advertising. And, and then TV, I mean, now it's gone from, 6 or 7 stations to 300 cable channels. And it's kind of like, okay, well, if I'm a local Madera business and I advertise with this cable, how do I know I'm not wasting money on all of these people in Fresno and this? And so, so a lot of people are turning to social media. You've got your Facebook page. I know when my campaign, when I ran for supervisor this last time, I used Facebook heavily, and I would, and I was able, I had a supervisor page, and then I could boost it for like $20, and it would spread out, to like 5,000 people, and so people are going like, what's he doing on my Facebook page? Click, delete, or whatever, but this guy's annoying. But it's things you can do with Facebook very inexpensively, so you always have to be, thinking about, okay, how can I better promote my product? Because the old ways to promote are kind of, they're gone, unfortunately. I mean, I'm not going to say that, I think the Tribune's going to survive in some form, some way. I mean, people still like newspapers for fictitious filings, but, and the comics, I love the comics. I love Dilbert. That's how I think I'm so cynical. I read Dilbert too much. I do Dilbert devotions or something. But anyway, but yeah, it's something to always think about. Some of the old traditional ways are not the right way to do it. Now, one thing that's against the ordinance is I know a guy named Sam goes around and will buy houses and he pokes his sign on poles, so you have to think about that. You also have to think about, professionalism too, because, the one thing you want to do in your plan is to think about, okay, I want to look as professional as possible when I'm promoting my product, and how can I do that, So, so you've got your pricing, location, that's huge, okay? So in Madera, we've got several commercial strips. We've got downtown. We've got, a few things over here near Bethard Square. We have Howard Road, and we've got Cleveland. And then we've got out here our Tozer development, and then, a little bit on Cleveland. So, you have to think about what you're selling, what you're promoting, what you're making, and people, and being accessible to folks. Now, there's some people that don't need to be very accessible because most of their sales are online. So it's basically, they could be anywhere and manufacture or whatever and then shoot their product out. But I mean, if you're in retail, it's super important. I know on the west side of Madera, there's a couple of areas that people are talking about, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful right there, Granada and Howard, to have a little shopping center and this and that. Well, I would never invest in something like that, and I'll tell you why. A little bit of research will show you that Madera is not going to be growing out that direction anymore. There's an ag easement right there at 24 and a half, which means that that's the barrier. It's not going to grow any farther. It's going to stay ag. So if somebody says, oh, I want to put this in, and Madera's going to grow this way and this way and this way, well, it may grow this way and this way. It's not growing that way. So you need to think about not only, the location, but the future of that location. So, and then whatever you're selling, think about, the people in the neighborhood and the convenience to get there. My auto mechanic, it's kind of hard to get to him sometimes because he's like 7 or 8, 10 minutes away depending on traffic, and which, I know that's a first world problem. That's what's the big deal with 8 to 10 minutes, right? But anyway, again, with a retailer, if there's somebody closer to them, you kind of think about where your customer base is and your location. So that's a big deal. And I know Chris talked about it with zoning and things of that sort. But just from a pure marketing standpoint, that's something that a business plan will help you to think about. The sales forecast, I'll talk a little bit about that when we get into financials. Now everybody's sitting there going, financials, I think I need to go now. But,
Before you do that, Rob?
Yeah.
The other thing too in marketing and social media, because it is such a big thing, what you want to do in your business plan is one, who's going to be responsible for that so that it's we know in our office that we're gonna have that constant exposure. The other thing is, if you're in business, not so much in our type of world, but, you need to monitor social media to see what's being said about you, like on Yelp, because I know, because I travel a lot, so if I'm going into a city and I'm gonna look for a restaurant, that's one of the first things I do, is I start going online and seeing what people say about restaurants. And sometimes people will just have like drops of that one bad experience, and then what they do is they throw it out on Yelp. So if you're that business, you wanna be able to go out there and be able to counter some of that, clean some of that up, because if you let that accumulate on a site like with Yelp, it can really be detrimental to your business. And that all needs to be built into the plan as far as who's gonna do that on a regular basis, because you have to be doing that daily.
Absolutely. And also updating your website with current information. I'll tell you right now that the County of Madera's website is an absolute disaster. It really is, because for the very reason Bobby said that somebody should be monitoring it or be responsible for it. That's the problem. There's nobody responsible for it. So that's something that we're going through right now to shore that up, to get somebody responsible for it, to have current information, to be able to get that out. Because the worst thing can happen is somebody, especially with a business, somebody goes on your website and says, oh, okay, there's all this current information. They go back 2 months later, it's the same. Oh, okay. And it's kind of like in the back of somebody's mind, it's like, okay, if you're not updating your website, is that a reflection on your business? So, but if you've got updates, you're sending stuff out, you're letting people know different things, it's like, okay, they're on top of things, and it gives people a different impression. So that's really, really important. You're looking at your business, considering your business plan, what kind of inventory do you need? And I'll tell you, inventory can be a killer, because it eats up your cash. So, businesses are always looking at keeping their inventory. There's kind of that balance, because you want to have enough inventory to, there's nothing like having full shelves, because I know that when we bought Tico, a lot of people were saying, man, they don't have anything there. They don't keep up with their inventory, and this and that. And now that you go there and the shelves are full, people can go there, and it just looks better. It's a better presentation. You think about going to a grocery store and maybe this, a quarter of the shelves are empty. It just kind of gives you this like, man, what happened to this place? Some hurricane, or it's just as like, whereas you go down and the shelves are full and all that. It just kind of gives you that nice, like, oh, this is a great place to go. Everything's nice and neat and things of that sort. But too much inventory eats up your cash, because all that inventory up on the shelves, that's money. I always hear business owners say, man, I can't believe it. My sales are growing by 30% a year, but man, I need money. I don't have any cash. It's like, well, I'll tell you where your money is. It's in receivables. It's in that inventory. It's so on paper, yeah, it shows that you made all this money, but because your inventory is growing, and that's where your cash is. So, it's very important to. Now, there's some businesses that maybe it's not a retail business or whatever, so you don't have to worry about keeping much inventory. But again, there's that balance. You try to keep as little as possible without compromising the integrity of your business. So just kind of keep that in mind. I know a business here in town that several years ago, they were borrowing several $1 million on their line of credit, not with us, but with another bank. And a lot of the money was tied up in their inventory. So what they did is they went through and they had tighter inventory controls. Now they don't borrow, because they had so much money tied up in inventory. So it was costing them a lot. Your suppliers, you think about, if you need daily deliveries for fresh product or food or whatever, and and for whatever reason they're not reliable and they don't make those daily drops and deliveries, that's going to hurt your business. So you need to think about the suppliers and folks that you deal with, how reliable are they? And with yourselves, your credit policies. If you sell with credit, giving people terms, you need to think about that. You give them, is it 30 days until payment, 10 days to payment? If they pay you up front, you give them a discount. So those are all things to think about, and we'll talk again a little bit about that. We'll work on the finances. Managing your accounts receivable. That's another place where money gets tied up. What is your policy going to be? Collecting money is one of the worst things that you have to do in business, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's a really, really good customer, who's buying a lot of stuff, but they are kind of taking advantage of you a little bit too. I've seen that a lot with clients. And so you really have to weigh that, because what can end up happening is they can take so much advantage of you that you can start losing business. And if things aren't going well for them, they take you too far out, they go bankrupt, and you're left holding the bag. I mean, I've seen that. I've seen that where somebody's gone bankrupt, and it can really hurt, the vendor, to the point where they go out of business because they've relied so much and they extended terms so far. So that's something you need to think about, as far as what kind of terms are you going to give and how lenient are you going to be. Again, you don't want to, it's that fine line of irritating somebody, but, they've got to understand too, they owe the money, so it's just one of those things. And also what's common with your industry, maybe your industry doesn't provide terms. Well, if your industry doesn't provide terms, that's the norm. You shouldn't have to provide terms either. Managing your payables, that's something to consider. When people are short of money, that's one of the places that you can get money or generate money by delaying the payment of your bills. And obviously that can create some issues too. That's called riding the trade, and your supplier becomes the bank, and that kind of, again, puts you on the other side of that situation. And so you want to make sure that you're careful about extending them too far out, because then it goes on your credit history. A lot of times you can get reported, and then if you try to establish credit with other people, with other suppliers, then people know about that because it's reported, and then they go, well, sorry, I can't extend terms. It's, got to collect on delivery, because you got a bad credit history. You're sitting there going, oh, great, So anyway, it's good to, make sure that you pay within terms. And that's also a source of cash if you can pay early enough, because a lot of times your vendors will provide discounts. It might be 2 at 10, a 2% discount if you pay within 10 days. So that's a way that you can actually make money. If you can take advantage of those discounts, that's a good thing to do. Now here's something that is so important. We're talking about management and organization, something that's so important, but it's a place that small business people, it's a place they think, well, wait, I can save money here. I don't want to do this and that. And so it's working with professionals and having advisory support. I see it all the time with less than successful and successful businesses where, owners, they don't want to have to pay the professionals, a lot of money. So, I mean, they'll, as far as financials, I'll ask, I need some updated financials to know where you are. And they'll say, oh, well, okay. And they give me these financials that are QuickBooks, but, they're on balance. It shows them, making all this money when I know they didn't make that much money, and it needs adjustments. And it's just, whereas if they pay a little bit of, and so my impression is, it's just like, oh my gosh, oh, I don't have a very good impression of them. Now I know they're making money and they know what, they kind of have it in their head, but, I can't communicate that to my credit guys, I'm just saying. So, so anyway, it's always good to have somebody you can rely on, a CPA that can help you through that process with your books, having internal books and external books. Having an attorney, a good business attorney that can advise you as far as how you should organize your business as a sole proprietor or partnership. There's a lot of us, or a corporation. It's good to have that advice, because a little bit of money up front can save you a whole lot of money in the back end. It's like, you know, it's kind of like you're getting sued about something and says, oh, I didn't know about that, you know. Payroll, I mean, payroll laws are just, you know, oh my gosh. I mean, there are seminar upon seminar about wage and hour laws that are going on, and it's not in the employer's favor. I mean, it's all, and you've got to be on top of this stuff. It is changing all the time. I know the chamber has seminars all the time about wage and hour, and there's attorneys and so forth. So it's something to always stay on top of, because that's something that, I mean, I know our bank got hit with a big lawsuit because it's some very, very minor, not this office, it was a bank as a whole, we're 53 offices, but because of some wage and hour issues. So, so please, you know, keep that in mind and have that attorney who can help you out. Your insurance agent, to make sure you have the right insurance, you know. All right, good, good. Have your insurance. Came back just in time. Well, yeah, insurance, it's huge, and it's really not as expensive as people think. You know, especially liability. There's no reason to not have a lot of liability, you know, because, you know, somebody could be, you know, there's this red tape here, but, you know, I mean, the city's still gonna get sued sometimes, you know, because of, you know, falling over steps and this and that, and every business gets sued in some way, some manner at some point. So it's, again, it's cheap insurance to have, insurance in terms of, you know, what you're selling, your goods. If a disaster happens, you know, it's important to have that, backing, you know, with your insurance, and it's also tax deductible. Okay, and you're saying, well, I'm not making any money, I don't need tax deductible. Well, it's still, you know, something you really, really need. And business consultants, mentors, you know, look for those, you know, have those people who can, who you can call, and, you know, whether it's a banker or somebody in the industry, and you can say, hey, this is not quite happening the way I'd like to see it, and they could come in and kind of help fine tune. There's some good people out there, and there's some not so good people out there, so just kind of be careful, but that's an important thing to have. Any questions up to this point? Yes.
These are some broad-based questions I wanted to ask. You noted that, and I know it because I've worked with Bobby as well on these matters, where we don't have good numbers as it relates to bringing in chains or big box types of retailers into the city. Mostly that number is that median household income range that flashes up as a red bar instead of a green bar. Does that now, there isn't any change in household incomes that, as it relates to attracting those businesses. Is that a unique opportunity for the small business owner here?
You know, I think it is in terms of scale. And what I mean by that is that, you know, maybe there's not enough business for that, you know, that certain entrepreneur, or that certain big box, whatever it might be, whereas there are, you know, a smaller population of people who would be attracted to that particular business. But still, you kind of have to be careful because, you know, for instance, you look at a place like Prices, you know, my parents call it high prices, but anyway, it was whatever, you know, farmers, you know, everything's high price. But no, they had some really nice stuff, and we did our registry through there, and back in the day when you did all that stuff, you know, and their China and things of that sort. They had, but you know, eventually they went out of business, and then I think it kind of came back as a scaled down type of thing. But it was, you know, some really nice stuff, some good things in there, but it didn't have it. I think it didn't have enough inventory. So you have to be kind of careful with those types of businesses, you know, thinking, okay, that's not here, but you know, then your public are looking for choices. So I still think sometimes they want to go someplace. And again, I think the internet and shopping and Amazon and all that has really kind of killed, you know, that opportunity in a lot of cases. So
there's advantages, but if I was looking at it through a clear lens, there's as many disadvantages that come with it.
Right. exactly.
When you just finished talking about a set of, well, they really are additional costs when it comes to having a potential bookkeeper or insurance or other supporting components of operating the business. Do you see those as very important to have within the business plan? To have those support services in place moving forward from day one? Is there a threshold where you absolutely have to have that attorney on file?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, because I would say, the critical one would probably be the bookkeeper or CPA. That's got to be critical because it's where you are financially. I mean, so if you don't know where you are as far as your sales or what your costs really are, and if you're making money or losing money, I mean, that could be, you could come to a quick end, knowing where, and again, I gave the example about, a business is growing. Say there's a subcontractor and says, oh, I've been making money for my boss all these years, and I'm going to go out and do my own thing. And, and after a year, they've grown themselves out of business. How does that happen? Well, they put a little money into it, and then they don't price things correctly, and they get lots of business, and then everything's tied up in receivables, it's tied up here and all that, and they don't have any money to meet payroll anymore, and so they go out of business. So that's the reason it is so important to at least have that financial advisor. Yes, Mr. Khan.
Yeah, couple things, just to kind of echo what Chris said too. Components of your business, having those outside professionals. What you need to do too is judge what time is the best time for you, because as I used to own my own business many years ago, and I used to tell my people that in the sales it's A time. A time is face to face with the customer. So is my time as a business owner better out there making sales and making my business successful, and then I outsource my bookkeeping? Or, if I think, well, I'm going to do the sales, but then I'm going to do my own bookkeeping, well, then I'm taking all these hours and I'm sitting here at the desk doing bookkeeping when I could be out producing income. So sometimes you have to weigh those differences too and say, it's more productive for me to sell rather than sit here and do my books, and I can get a professional to do my book. And then what Chris was saying, the chain store versus, if we don't have a chain store, a lot of that has to do with the buying power too, is that, like, if I'm gonna go try to compete with Target, I'm not gonna, maybe I can scale it down, but I'm not gonna have their buying power, so pricing becomes, where Rob said, pricing becomes, and then mentors, I know Julianne, which is, on with her, because she, was very active in SCORE, and then there's a small business development, agencies that come out for free and help mentor you and get you started. And then just in closing too, on your business plan, if you are going to be taking out credit cards, you need to build that factor in too, because credit card companies, I think as you probably all know, if I charge $10, they're gonna take a certain percentage of that, so you need to build that into your business plan as well. And then when you touched on tax returns, you only get one shot, like a small business, and I did this to myself, and you kind of look for all the deductions you can get, because you don't want to pay the taxes. So some of your deductions may be a little marginal, but you say, okay. But then what happens is I go see Rob, and I tell Rob, yeah, I'm making, I'm making a lot of money. And he goes, well, let me see your, I need your tax returns to do your loan. You give him your tax returns, and he goes, wow, it shows you just made a little bit of money. So, if you're gonna, kind of play it, a little bit loose and report to the government that you're not making much money, remember when you go to the bank, that's the lens they're gonna do you. So those are just some of the comments I wrote down while you were talking.
Good points, absolutely. And just that kind of reminds me a little bit also as far as, giftedness, okay? Everybody in this room does something really, really well, okay? And it might be you're a great analyst, you're a great strategist, you're a great craftsperson, you're a great administrator, you're a visionary or whatever. But if you're gifted in certain areas, that could mean you're not so gifted in other areas, okay? Like I know guys that, come in and, they're really good at building things, but, I talk about tax return and their eyes glaze over. It's just like, huh? Well, tax return? What? It's just like I'm speaking a foreign language, and they'll say, oh, okay, and then they'll come back and they'll bring some papers and they'll kind of go, okay, yeah, here's, some stuff, and it's just, I look at it and it's just this mess, it's 3 or 4 years old or whatever. So, which is fine, I don't expect anybody to be a financial expert, but if you're in that situation, recognize it and get somebody who is the expert who can do that. So, and there's also the person who's this great administrator and they're, man, they know the numbers and they can, they know the costs and they're really good at that, but they couldn't sell water to somebody who's dying of thirst. They're an awful salesperson. It's just kind of like, so if that's the case, you've got the back end covered, but you've got to get somebody in the front end. Don't be the face of the business, like, it's like a waiter coming up and says, yeah, what do you want to eat today? Oh, well, what do you recommend? It's like, I don't know. Whatever. Yeah, nothing's good, Or do you have somebody, oh, hi, how you doing? Great seeing you here. And it's or, in sales, it's kind of like, oh, how can I help you? Let me help you find, oh, yeah, look at that. Okay, yeah, you know what? I think I could do that, but you know what? That costs more money. Maybe I could, where somebody gets, they're really helpful. So recognize what your strengths are and recognize what your weaknesses are. And emphasize and leverage those strengths and get some help on those weaknesses. So, yeah, we don't expect, you can't, if you're not a strategist, if you're not an analyst, if you're whatever, and, and that's just not your makeup, it's kind of like, it's very important, but get some help, and if you're terrible in sales, get somebody that can help out there. So, now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was, it's probably the thing, again, that causes people's eyes to glaze over the most, but it is the most important thing, and it's all about the financial plan and forecasting, and having a sound financial picture starting up your business. So, because whatever business you're going to start in, you're going to need money, okay? The amount of money is going to be, a lot of it's going to be based on whatever the business is, for instance, a service business, you're going to need, besides whatever, if you're purchasing a business, whatever you're using to purchase the business, you're going to need some working capital, and so you need to forecast what that working capital is going to be over the next 60 days or so. So you're going to sit down and cover expenses. You're going to go, okay, my utilities are this, my rent is this, my payroll is this, my cost of goods sold are this and this and this. And you might say, okay, so the first month it's going to be $50,000, the second month it's going to be $50,000. So, I should have $100,000 going into this business. Now, and it may be less than that. Maybe it's $20,000. So you should have $20,000 first month, $20,000 second month, and maybe a third month, maybe $50,000 to $60,000 going in, and then by that time, hopefully, if it's an existing business, whatever revenue was occurring before you bought it continues. If it's a startup business, though, you need to kind of be realistic and think about ramping up, because you're not going to have all this business coming in on day one. You may market your business and so forth, but it's kind of going to be if you're not at Chipotle, where everybody knows Chipotle, you're like, hey, Chipotle's in Madera, let's go over there. It's going to kind of be one of these, ramping up. So that's where, financial forecasting comes in. So, and there's some forms in the back that go over that, and that could be a seminar in itself, but we're not going to spend whole lot of time doing that. But I do want to mention, create the awareness and the absolute necessity to do that, because, you know, if you're realistic with your sales projections, then you'll know what you need going in. There's nothing like, you know, starting up your business and after 3 months you've run out of money, and, you know, there's no bank that's going to loan you that money because you haven't established, you know, number one, you've only shown losses, and, you know, a lot of times banks aren't really good at loaning money on hopes and prayers, you know. So, so that's something to consider. And then, if you are short after 3 or 4 months and maybe aren't showing profitability until month 6 or 7, you need to think about having that money there. And it's just like, where's it going to come from? Is it going to come from grandma? Is it going to come from mom and dad? Am I going to raid my savings account? Am I going to, you know, take it from my retirement? Do I have it saved up already? Or do I, maybe it's a husband and wife, and the wife is working over here. She continues working to kind of help cover some of the overhead and things of that sort. So those are critical things to consider in regards to your business, because again, if you haven't covered that, then you know, it could be lights out after all this planning. Yes.
In your personal opinion, I know that you get a lot of loans coming in, and I know that there's money to be lent out, but obviously people aren't bringing in the right financial projections. Looking at the startup expenses, is there a specific area where people just miss the mark? They forget to even put it in there because maybe we weren't taught, maybe, you know, we didn't know that should have been there. Is there a specific area that you've seen that has been missed a lot consistently throughout the years that you've been there?
I would say, yeah, I would say sales. I can, most of the projections I've seen have been way too optimistic. You know, I mean, you know, somebody will bring something in and they'll show these sales, you know, just going off the charts, and at the end of 3 years, you know, they could probably retire and go to the Bahamas or something, and, you know, and I just kind of look at that and I just kind of go, you know, okay, well, let me see, what if, and so that's the whole thing, is being too optimistic on your revenues, you know, or your profitability. So I would say you need to err on the side of conservatism, you know, so go in there and say, okay, rather than the best case for sales, let's look at the worst, or something that's not like the worst case, like, oh gosh, I'm going to be out of business in 3 years. It'd be like, what is realistic? What do you think could really, really happen and maybe through all your study up, you know, through the business plan up to that point, you'd have a pretty good idea of what would happen. But that's got to be the case. So always be conservative. Show more expenses, less revenue. And so that way, when you go into the business, you'll know what your capital need is going to be.
Is there some resource that would help the startup have a better handle on those projections, either at startup costs or just your sales projections, your profit and losses, your first year profit and loss? Or is it really kind of is the failing in the kind of the seat of the pants guesstimates? Is there some type of resource where you can look towards an industry standard or something?
You know, there are, I'm trying to think, I know there's multitudes now. There are these banking studies that show different industries and for mature businesses, not necessarily startups. But I would say for startups, there's probably something you could Google for, you know, startup this or startup that. Use that as a guide, and then substitute those numbers for what you know. You know, for instance, if you know your rent's going to be $1,500 a month, and it shows, then you can plug that in. You know that's going to be, you know that your personal overhead is $3,000 a month. Okay, you put that in. So there's a lot of things that you'll know what it is, and so then you can see, okay, I'm going to project these sales. But yeah, some of it's more parochial, more regional as far as what that might be.
Is the mistake taking the things you know, like the costs of doing business, is the mistake in the sales fabricate a profit from knowing what the break-even point is, or at least on the cost side?
I would say, yeah, I would say there's probably more costs involved than somebody really realizes. It's, you know, I have, anyway, a small partnership interest in this guy who's a manufacturer. And I know with him, there were always disasters, well, not major disasters, but there's always this unknown thing that was kind of a negative that would come out of left field. You know, it's just like, oh, I didn't see this cost, or, oh, you know, this thing came up, or this guy promised, you know, that they were gonna buy this much product and that failed, you know, so, yeah, things, so I guess, I think there's that, as well as, you know, probably evenly matched with overestimating sales.
So build caution into your numbers?
Exactly.
Is that really the tip?
Yep, always be cautious.
I'd take it one step further and say too, if you're really struggling with the sales projection, and because obviously what that's an indication is that you don't really know that industry as thoroughly as maybe you thought you did. So that might be one of the first red flags that goes up and say, maybe I need to rethink this venture before I take the next step, because maybe that, you know, you're doing a business plan. The business plan you're hoping is going to lead you to a successful business, but it could also maybe take you to a point where you say, you know what, this is not the venture I need to get into. I don't know this industry as well as I thought. It sounded fun, kind of like Andy Madillon's story about opening up a sports bar, and then, you know, somebody sat him down and said, you know, what do you know about this? You know, have you ever done it? Do you have any experience? Have you ever been in the food industry? You know, all the answers were no, 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 no. As you get through that plan, and you're struggling with, you know, how do I project these sales? Maybe that's a sign that you shouldn't be going into this business, that you don't know enough about it. And maybe you can still go into it, but maybe you need to take some steps back and reanalyze where you're going, so that you get to the, you know, need to do more research.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Juliana.
Okay,
Yeah.
just for anybody that's looking at this and is getting kind of scared at having to figure this out, I'm just gonna do a quick little plug if that's okay. All of these sheets are downloadable on score.org. It's a free website, so all you would actually do is put the information that you have there, and it will self-populate for you. So you don't have to do any other thinking other than going and doing your research at how much it's gonna cost you for you to buy the material, and then you input into the spreadsheet, and it's gonna go ahead and tell you what it is that you need to have done. And especially to make sure that we have that proper projection. We have anything from startup expenses to opening day balance sheets to 12-month cash flow. And this is something that's really great. Like he said, like now you get to go and research, you know, what is the industry doing? What is this doing? And then you plug it into the worksheet. So it's not like just a number that you came out of through the top of your head. Now you're able to show the banker and say, hey, Mr. Banker, this is where I came up from this, and this is the, you know, this is the information that I got off the internet, and this is what I've been price quoted. So now your numbers are more dead on, and if you're conservative with, you know, what you're projecting to buy or to make in sales, it becomes a lot sexier to somebody who's going to say, okay, maybe I will be able to grant you this loan because not only have you been able to do your homework, but it looks like it's a feasible plan, and you've actually put the thought into it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. And if you look at these forms too, and if it just looks like Greek, unless you know Greek, then it doesn't look like, it looks easy. But it's, you know, but it's just this, it just looks like this maze, this mess, and you're just totally discouraged coming, even, you don't even want to leave the gate because it just looks like something that you don't want to tackle. Find somebody that will do it for you. Find a friend, a family member, a mentor, whatever, who's into that sort of thing. Because there are people who are into it. They'll look at it and go, oh yeah, sure, okay. And then they'll come out and then learn it after they're able to put it together. Because, you know, let's face it, again, going back to the giftedness, you know, somebody can talk about, you know, building something, you know, and I admire people who are artists and they're manufacturers and they can build furniture and all those things. 'Cause I have no skills in any of those areas. And and if that's what they're really, really good at doing, let them loose. Or if you're one of those people, go for it. But, you know, the financial stuff is like, okay, okay, how much does that stuff, the materials? And so, you know, think about a team, you know, a team approach. Don't try to, you know, have to be the Lone Ranger and doing it by yourself and you're missing out some, you know, think about developing, again, that team that can kind of create the right package. So, cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, very good.
I want to acknowledge that Councilperson Cece Foley Gallegos has joined us mid-audience. And the shameless plug is okay in this particular instance. The city hasn't developed any relationship with an organization that might be there to help you with a startup approach or even to build an existing business. But I would note that SCORE has done a workshop here in the community recently, and that's exciting for the city to see in light of the fact that this whole workshop series is about helping the small business owner be successful. So the materials you have today, those are, in some cases, they're exactly formed straight from the website that you can use to self-populate. In other cases, we've taken some of their resources and tried to adapt them to this particular workshop series to help you guys contemplate moving forward with a business plan, because it is so important if we really want to build a set of very successful small businesses in the community. So that leads us to my shameless plug for next week. Next week, we're going to bring in 3 successful business owners here into City Hall. They're going to share their experiences, their strengths, and their hopes moving forward. That these are all viable business owners in the marketplace today, and they have a long story to share and tell. Then you can use their experiences to perhaps inspire you to ask questions about and relate those experiences to your business aspirations. All right? So that completes our presentation today. I'll see you next week for